everybody, and welcome to Phillies Extra, the baseball show from the Philadelphia Inquirer. My name is Scott Lauber, and I cover the Phillies in Major League Baseball for the Inquirer and Inquirer.com. I'm so happy that you found us and decided to take a few minutes and give a listen, and hopefully a follow. I promise it'll be worth your time, because my guest this week is unlike any other in the 4.5 months since we started this podcast. We've been fortunate to be joined by all-stars, such as Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, Kyle Schwarber, and Aaron Nola. We've had top prospects like Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford. We've even sat down with a couple of World Series champions, Cole Hamels and Larry Bowa. But we have not had a Hall of Famer until now. So I'm thrilled and excited to bring in Billy Wagner for this week's conversation. In a few weeks, on July 27th to be exact, Billy will be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. He'll be joined in the class of 2025 by Ichiro Suzuki and CC Sabathia, who were elected, like Billy Wagner, by the writers, and by Dave Parker and the late Phillies great Dick Allen, who were voted in by the Classic Era Baseball Committee. Now, full disclosure, I've been a Hall of Fame voter since 2016, which was Wagner's first year on the ballot, and I voted for him every year for 10 years. But I also never thought Wagner was a slam dunk. Look, I've listened to people give valid arguments against him, most notably that he pitched only 903 innings, which will be the second fewest of any pitcher in the Hall of Fame, and that he had a 10.03 ERA in 11 1/3 innings in the postseason. But in deciding to check Wagner's name on my ballot, there were a few numbers that I couldn't ignore. For one thing, he allowed 601 hits in those 903 innings, and opponents batted 187 against him. He was literally impossible to hit, almost impossible. For another, he struck out 1/3 of the 3,600 batters that he faced. He was a 7-time All-Star, which means he was routinely recognized among the best players at his position, in his case, closer. It mattered less to me that he racked up 422 saves, but if you want to go there, he ranks 8th on the all-time save list. Wagner spent only a sliver of his career, 2 of his 16 major league seasons, with the Phillies. In fact, his, I guess, technically last day with the Phillies was my first day covering the Phillies. That was the day he signed with the New York Mets. But as you'll hear him say in our conversation, those were probably 2 of his most dominant seasons. He also pitched for the Mets at the absolute peak of their rivalry with the Phillies. If you're at least in your 20s, you probably remember it pretty well. There were big-time stars on both sides, from Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley and Ryan Howard here in Philly, to David Wright, Jose Reyes, and Pedro Martinez in New York, and Billy Wagner was in the middle of that whole thing. This is the 64th season in which the Phillies and Mets have coexisted, and as hard as it is to believe, they've had only 10 mutual winning seasons. This year, they're headed for what looks like the 11th, but 4 of those seasons have came in succession, beginning in 2005, and the last 2 years, 2007 and 2008, were just absolutely terrific baseball theater. So it seems like we're entering what could be another golden era of Phillies-Mets. The Mets took out the Phillies in the NL Division Series last year, and this year it's shaping up to be an epic battle for the NL East title, with the team squaring off Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at Citizens Bank Park. I wanted to catch up with Billy Wagner about being a part of the rivalry in its heyday, as well as his Hall of Fame career, which will be celebrated in a few weeks up in upstate New York. And if you stick around after the conversation, I'll bring in my colleague, Inquirer columnist David Murphy, to talk about the Phillies with a little less than 6 weeks to go until the trade deadline. Let's get right to it then. Here's my sit down with Billy Wagner. Billy Wagner, welcome to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for hopping on.
Oh, hey, it's always great to be back. Always great to talk to you guys.
Well, you have a pretty momentous day coming up here in 6 weeks now. On Sunday, July 27th, to be exact, you'll be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in a ceremony in Cooperstown, New York. I sent you a note back in January after you got elected on your 10th and final year on the writer's ballot, I might add. But I'll congratulate you again here on an honor that is so richly deserved for you. And I don't want to say that it was worth the wait because not many Hall of Famers waited much longer than you did, but I have a feeling that won't matter much to you when you step up there on the stage next month.
No, but thank you again. It is a tremendous honor, and I mean, when you are in a situation where you're at the last ballot, the last opportunity, it is nerve-wracking to say the least. But like you said, it doesn't matter how, you just want to get in, and I'm super excited. I've been working on the speech, and I've got a lot of help, and it's hard to put 53 years into 10 minutes, so it has been unique, and the reflection of the journey has been fun to go back and reflect on.
I was going to ask you how the speechwriting process is going, because I think I know a few baseball writers who probably would volunteer to help out if you needed it. But how's that going, just to kind of, encapsulate what you want to say and make sure you acknowledge all the right people that you want to acknowledge and all of that? I would imagine it's a pretty daunting thing.
It's been daunting. It really has. I'm actually getting ready to go in about I think about 2:00 today and start working on it again with a friend who has been helping me write this, and I think we're on about the 10th version of this. So I think it's constantly changing because I wake up at night and I send something to him that I want to put in there. How do I incorporate that? And so, I'm not much of a speech writer. I enjoy talking, obviously, but I think now putting it into, the appreciations to all the people that have been a huge help and a part of that journey. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to find the right words and the thank yous and the appreciations and to really say what you want to say, because it's such a humbling experience when you think about the journey and the people that surrounded you, from the writers to your teammates to your family to the coaches. There's just so much to say, and how you say it is really personal for me, and I want to say it the right way, but I've never been gifted with that type of lingo. So I wake up at night worried about not saying the right things or not saying it about the right people, getting everybody in there. So, listening to a lot of other people and their speeches they say it and seem so much, more graceful than I will, I'm sure. So, it is very nerve-wracking for me, because I don't want to stumble over people that I really and truly appreciate.
You were super emotional when the results came in, and for good reason. I mean, it's been 15 years since you threw your last pitch in a major league game, and I'm sure there were times back when you were getting 10% and 15% of the vote where you probably figured you wouldn't be recognized in this way. I wonder what the last few months have been like in terms of kind of processing that reality of yes, this is really happening. I'm a Hall of Famer. And when did it kind of actually sink in?
I don't know if it ever really, I don't know if it has sunk in. I mean, I have been, busy with high school and our baseball program, which has helped me by the time. But to really to think about that, I and walk through the halls is really just, I don't know if anybody ever feels like you belong or you are a Hall of Famer when you walk in and you see the names that are on that wall and just see and hear the stats and, just the history of the game to be incorporated in that is just, super emotional for me, because I'm a fan of the game. I love what the game has done for me, but I enjoyed it as a kid watching the games and listening to the Mel Allens and the guys who made it, meaningful. Thinking about getting up in the morning to watch Johnny Bench do the breakfast bunch. Things like that. Those were big moments because we didn't have that everyday experience. And now, having baseball 24/7. You have channels of baseball, replays, and I mean now there's just so much opportunity to see it, be around it. But how we came up, I just I that whole journey of going through that has been kind of overwhelming because of just the who you're standing in front of. Nolan Ryan. I mean, I had the great opportunity in 16 years to meet some of the greatest players ever. Robin Roberts being one of my favorite people, taking him out to dinner with him and his son in our bullpen, meeting Mike Schmidt, Nolan Ryan, all these great, Sandy Koufax. I mean, to stand in front of these people and be honored as one of their that small elite group. I mean, it's hard to really take in and really think you're part of that. So, it hasn't sunk in it, and I don't know if it ever will because I don't think that I saw that really coming in that way.
I covered my first induction back in 2004, and there's something about the place, right? Like there's a reception the night before, and you go in, and I saw like sports writers who had been doing this for, way longer than I was covering the minor leagues at the time. Like they'd been covering the major leagues for a super long time, sort of stopping their tracks, right? When Sandy Koufax walked through the plaque room and at that reception, or, hey, there's Warren Spahn. And like wherever you look, I wonder if you kind of had a moment like that when you toured the Hall of Fame, when after you got elected, where it was just kind of like, oh my gosh, this is sort of overwhelming.
Oh my gosh, did I? I mean, I just when I got elected in, the text messages, the voicemails. I mean, one of the first people was Johnny Bench. I mean, I've got goosebumps thinking about it because I mean, there's just no way to prepare yourself for something. Goose Gossage has been a huge help to me, just talking me through the process, and and anybody that knows Goose knows how he is just he's been wonderful for me because in a lot of ways we're alike emotionally, but he has been just a lot of help in Raleigh Fingers and guys with a lot of support. But I don't know if any of this will ever prepare you to walk through the hall and see a Babe Ruth and a Warren Spahn or a Cy Young and Ty Cobb. You for a kid like me from Southwest Virginia to thinking that this would ever be possible, that I would be in a room as an equal is very, makes me speechless because of just the latitude of how improbable this was to come from Southwest Virginia to now be in the Hall of Fame with the greats of the greats.
I'm sure Goose Gossage could spice up that speech if you let him.
Yeah, I can't allow him to get involved in that, but he has been. There's been a lot of guys who have really kind of helped me to, because you get all these like you can only talk for this long, and what do you talk about, and how personal does it get? They've been a lot of people help me with that, but I mean, I told them I think they gave me 10 to 12 minutes, so I was telling guys, I was like, well, that gives me about 8 minutes of talking because I'll be so emotional that day because to come from Southwest Virginia to be undersized, to be that battle uphill, and to not really see your own value as you played, to be valued in this way is just overwhelming. And just to know that, the message that I have for the younger kids, the kids from Southwest Virginia and the state of Virginia and Division III players is, there's a lot to be said, because you don't have to be 6'5" to be able to be incorporated in this. And, most of the guys in the Hall of Fame aren't that big anyway.
Right.
So there's a big message from me to try to incorporate and still not go over 10, 12 minutes. But to have a message to what I'm saying is there's a lot to this.
Yeah, without a doubt. So you spent 2 of your 16 major league seasons with the Phillies, but the show is called Phillies Extra. So I want to take you back to November 2003. You're an all-star closer on some really good Astros teams. You guys are really tight too. I know how close you are with Biggio, Bagwell, Oswalt, all those guys,
Right.
Berkman. Really good teams. You throw 100. You pitched in the postseason. Meanwhile, the Phillies haven't made the playoffs in 10 years. They're coming off an 86-win season, and they're moving into a new ballpark, and they trade for you. And so you come to this sports-obsessed, championship-starved, crazy Northeast city. It's a 3-for-1 trade, and everyone's looking at you and saying, he's the missing piece. He'll be the one to put us over the top. That has to be kind of, for all that you had experienced up until that point, that's got to be unlike anything you'd gone through, I would imagine.
Oh, well, it was. The trade in itself was something that I wasn't expecting. And, nothing prepares you for that first trade, especially when it's out of the blue. But, when I played in Houston, you had Bagwell, you had Biggio, you had Jeff Kent, you had Moises Alou, you had veterans that had been there, Shane Reynolds, Mike Hampton. You had people around you that had been there and could lead the way. I would just follow in the lead. And when you get put into that trade and you come in, and I don't know if you can live up to it, but I mean, the thing is, if I could go back and handle things differently, it would definitely be how I handled, just the surroundings. But the thing that I would not have changed is I think it might've been the best 2 years of my career. It was something that I'd never experienced in my life, is the passion in Philadelphia. I mean, Houston was not known for that type of passion. And when you get into, that Northeast, you start, I mean, there was something to that I wasn't prepared for. And that had a direct effect on just how I think I handled all the things the wrong way in so many ways. But, the great players that I played with, I mean, I tell you, the bullpens that I was with, I was a huge fan of Larry Bowa, and Vuk was tremendous. That rugged, hard nose, that fit me. So, I enjoyed that. But gosh, it was just, I tell you, I wish I could have gone back and handled some of that better. I think of any of the regrets I have, there were probably the Phillies, not getting to the playoffs, and the probably 06 team not, going to the World Series. But, for me, that was my first understanding of what passionate fans were about, and that you better bring your A game every single night. And that was, something I think about quite often.
2 years with the Phillies, 1.86 ERA, 146 strikeouts, 76 hits, and 126 innings, 0.81 WHIP, 172 batting average against, 30.5% strikeout rate, 59 saves. If you look back at it, you said maybe the 2 best years back to back that you'd ever had, probably the peak of your powers there at that point. If there was something that you could do over about the 2 years there, or maybe something that you could have done to maybe extend that relationship longer, you've said that there might be some regrets. I mean, what sticks out to you about, like, if you had to rewrite those 2 years, how you'd rewrite them?
Well, I think for me, maturity-wise and handling the press, because I wasn't used to that attention at all, and I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know how to handle the questions of when you were good, but, you still didn't get it done, or when certain just questions, not knowing how to handle it, how to speak to it in a way that wasn't defensive. I think that was ways that I'd go back, because I think that would have taken a lot of pressure off of me and my team, and a lot of the things that hold on a second. Hold on one second. You're not going to believe it. My dog's going to give me 1 second. That's how it works for me.
Yeah.
Dogs go crazy, wife's gone, and I'm in charge of household duties.
What's how many dogs do you have?
I have two. Poodles. Two
Okay.
standard poodles, and one's 5 and feels like he's about 3.
Okay.
Wide open.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, no worries.
Yes, I know you're outside. Yes, I know I put you outside. We're getting some work done on our house.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, not at all. You're good. All right.
Sorry. But going back, I guess, to the question of how I would probably rewrite that would be learning how to handle the press better, having a better idea of and I think that would have taken the pressure off of myself and the pressure off of some of my teammates. I wasn't old and super experienced, but I'd been around longer than Jimmy and Pat, and they had been through the fires of that growth because they were young. The Scott Rowlands, had just left. You had some veterans with David Bell.
Yeah.
And, we'd just gotten John Lauber and some guys like that. But we were all not used to, those that setting. I mean, but if I could go back and rewrite that for myself, it would be how I would have handled having controlled my emotions with the press and really enjoying the moment with guys like Jimmy and Pat, Chase. I mean, I think the upside of that team was getting ready to really explode. And, it was what I think I left. And when I left, it was about 2008 when they went to the World Series and won. But I think, that was the table setting and things like that. But if I had to do it again, that would be where I would start.
Yeah, my first day covering the Phillies was technically your first day with the Mets. It was the day you end up signing with the Mets as a free agent in the fall of 2005 before the 2006 season. And one of my favorite things from that time period, 2006 to 2009 specific, was that Phillies-Mets rivalry, which was as hot as it's ever been. I strongly believe that like baseball around here is always better when the Phillies and Mets are good at the same time, which has happened so infrequently during their shared histories together. So, what stands out to you from, 07, 08, Jimmy Rollins, right, team to beat and all that, comes to Shea, gets booed. You guys come into Philly, have some epic games. A lot of those guys on the 07 Phillies still talk about, that game in August where they walk you off and LaDuca says, well, they're dancing on the field now. We'll see about later. And that kind of throws, it was really hot and heavy at that point. So what was it like being a part of that?
Well, yeah, I tell you, emotionally, I knew that coming that whole series, I knew how good Jimmy and Chase and Pat and those guys were, and they just kept getting better. That was never gonna. It was, coming to Philly was not an easy place to play anyway. It wasn't easy when you were a player, and it wasn't easy when you were a visitor. And so, you knew you had to be on. You had to be better than your A game when at that point. Because once Jimmy and those guys kind of got the ball rolling and they were just confident and understood what they were about, you had to get very lucky to beat those guys. And so, and I tell you, I think Pat took me deep twice. There were some epic battles. If you had one good day, the next day you better be better. And that was how it rolled. Once Philly got to their peak, they really were just about unbeatable, though. They were bringing in the guy. Brad Litch comes in, and I remember Brad asking me, he goes, how do I handle Philadelphia? And I said, don't blow a save. And I think that year he didn't blow a save.
He
I was
didn't.
like, well, that's
48 for
one way
40.
of doing it, buddy.
Yeah.
But I mean, gosh, they were. I mean, Rowan went out to center field. They just got super tough really quick. They got really super tough in a lot of ways. And a lot of ways of what I watch a lot of Philly games now. It's crazy how much I follow the Phillies. My son went to Towson, and so we started watching that. And I have a lot of good friends from that team and that are in the clubhouse and stuff. And so, to watch that progression, to see how good, they went. I wasn't surprised. I knew how difficult it was and how well we'd have to play against those guys, and they were very confident. And so watching Jimmy and those guys and how tough they got, and Jimmy really got tough. He was such a good leader, took a lot of the attention off of some of the guys, and was able to go on and play. And I mean, you had guys that would step up, and they were incredibly tough.
Yeah, I mean, it was so much fun to watch those two teams go at it, and you wonder whether we're headed for another period of time like that now with how good both of them are. But those days of like you guys going head to head, and you guys had Wright and Reyes on the left side of they had Chase and Howard on the right side, and Jimmy, and just sort of the rivalries within the rivalry. That was a lot of fun to be a part of.
It was. It really was. And I think you can only really appreciate it when it's over. Because you get caught up in all the he said, she says and stuff like that. But I tell you, watching Jimmy, and I was when Jimmy came into the league, he made his first All-Star game in Seattle. I remember sitting down helping him order uniforms or T-shirts for his team and things like that. But there was always that unique bond because he was just a super. You love his smile, the way he you knew he was going to be something special, and Chase Utley was probably one of my favorite teammates just because of what he did. And Ryan Howard, the year he came in, and I mean, 20 home runs, and it felt like a month. Really changed that whole my last season to almost. I think we came up a game or so short of, but I mean, you could just see right there that they were gonna. It was gonna be really, really tough.
I can't let you go without congratulating you on something else. You coach high school baseball at the Miller School of Albemarle in Charlottesville, Virginia, and your team won the Division I state championship last month. I think it was the fourth state title for you in 14 years as a coach, but the first since you moved up to D1. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. I think you started coaching there almost as soon as you retired. So what made you want to go into coaching? Why at the high school level? And what's kept you going there for so long? Because you started before your son was in high school, and you're still coaching after he's graduated, well past his, so obviously this is more than just about wanting to coach Will. This is about really wanting to coach kids.
Well, I've got three boys. My youngest was part of this championship team, but what I enjoy about coaching is developing and going through the experiences I had as a young kid and going through all the way up to pro ranks, all the things that I did wrong, all the mistakes I made. I wanted to be there for my kids, of course, but I also wanted to help kids and really promote the game and really just let everybody know how hard this game is. I enjoy the kids. I wouldn't say I'm a very good coach. I would say I'm very good at, motivating the kids to achieve what they want to achieve. I guess the kind of a running joke is if they can keep me from coaching, we have a chance. But I've been really blessed with a lot of talent and commitment from kids. But what I enjoy the most is just the relationship with the kids and having the moment to sit there and talk to the kids during that stressful time in the game or before the game or after the game or when they've had that slump or when they're doing well, just to kind of, help them work through what they have to do. And because everybody that comes into high school baseball now thinks they're going to the big leagues tomorrow. And, you know, that was a far cry from when I came up. I never even thought about something like that. Now it's just an everyday, conversation. Like, am I going to get drafted? Can this happen? And for me, I think having a sound sounding board for these kids is important. And the social media is so tough on kids to live up to today. So just being a sounding board for these kids and enjoying their other people's success has really given me a lot of joy. And to be able to sit there and watch my kids go through it and enjoy it, it's just an added bonus.
You're coaching kids now who are not old enough to have seen you play. What is there? Do they ask a lot of questions? Are you just Coach Wagner to them, or are they like all about, hey, tell me about facing so and so, or what was it like to pitch, in the playoffs with the Astros, or what was it like to pitch for the Mets? Are you getting a lot of that, or is it just mostly?
Most of these kids today. Now, when I first started, there was more, like, hey, I remember going to a game. I remember watching you pitch. Now, these kids are like, my stories there, you see who was that? What was that? Where did you play? When did you play? The Hall of Fame journey has kept some stories around for them to watch, but, and stuff like that. And so, when I go out to Cooperstown, I'm pretty sure 2/3 of my team's going to be there and stuff, but, and they'll really get to see the real, tradition of baseball, and which is, a positive setting. But, the days of knowing how good you were, they start bringing up other people. And I am not a huge follower of baseball. I do watch baseball, but I couldn't tell you half the names and stuff. Of course I watch Will and things, but I become a very biased dad to the point of like, hey, as long as he does well, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm past the wins and losses for certain things. That's their journey. I'm totally about my kids being successful and having fun and finding joy. But, the history of the game has kind of been lost on some of these young kids. And so, for me, being able to play that back when they come to Cooperstown and them to see some of the people they're going to see and the stories they're going to hear. And, that's a blessing I can give them.
Billy, we could probably talk all day, but this was so much fun. I know you've always got a lot going on, especially right now. It's going to be a busy summer for you with the Hall of Fame and everything that comes with it. Enjoy every second of it in Cooperstown next month, and hopefully the Phillies can have you out at Citizens Bank Park at some point later this summer to kind of mark the occasion. But it's going to be, I'm sure it's going to be a great summer and a phenomenal weekend for you in July.
Well, I'm very excited, and I really appreciate you having me. And I believe I'm supposed to go out in end of August and maybe throw out the first pitch. So I'm excited to go back and stuff. It's crazy how much of a fan I am, but I do appreciate everything, and I appreciate you having me back.
Well, thanks so much for sharing some of your time here with us at Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to thank Billy Wagner again for sitting down with us this week. For our Reporter's Notebook segment, let's bring in my teammate, Inquirer columnist David Murphy. Murph, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Good to see you, Scott.
The trade deadline, to me, is sort of baseball's version of the NFL draft. Like we start talking about it months in advance. I kind of start writing about it at the 40-game mark, I feel like, which is like mid-May. And we guess which teams are going to buy and which teams are going to sell. And we, with the addition of the extra wild card, it becomes harder and harder to differentiate between those two groups, really up until the trade deadline. And then, up until the All-Star break. And then even after that. So we're a little less than 6 weeks away right now. And as it relates to the Phillies, I think it makes sense to look at the reliever market. We don't know yet who's going to be available, but one thing we do know, and you wrote a column about this the other day, is that the return for bullpen help is going to be costly. Why don't you kind of expand on that point a little bit in terms of like what the Phillies are going to have to give up to get a reliever to help their bullpen?
Well, fortunately, we have a tailor-made example, which I mentioned in my column the other day with last year's San Diego Padres, who now keep in mind they probably had a better bullpen going into it with Robert Suarez and Estrada Mojarone. But they did essentially last year at the deadline what, you could argue the Phillies would need to do this year in order to really get this roster to a point where, you would start picking them as right up there with the Dodgers. They added a guy named Jason Adam, who was a longtime setup man for the Rays, essentially their backup closer for a while. And then Tanner Scott, who was one of the most electric arms available last year's deadline, and quite frankly might be better than anybody that was available at this year's trade deadline, depending on if Aroldis Chapman is on the market, and depending on Mason Miller, what you think of him, if he's actually what he was last year. But long story short, they acquired an eighth, ninth inning combo really. And it cost them two top 100 prospects and two more of their top 5. So essentially 4 of their top 5 prospects in that system going into the trade deadline. That's what they spent on these 2 relievers. And one of those relievers was a rental, Tanner Scott, who's not there anymore. So essentially they got, 3 months of Tanner Scott and a year and 3 months of Jason Adam. And it essentially forced them to rewrite their entire prospect list. Now, I would argue that the Phillies prospect list is probably in a little better shape than the Padres was at this time last year. The 2 guys they sent out were starters who were having kind of uneven seasons, and this year have not necessarily made them regret it. So it's really hard to really talk apples and apples there. I don't think look, Andrew Painter, Aiden Miller, Escobar, Tate, I don't think any of those guys it would require. But if you're talking for the remaining group, that's a lot of prospects. And especially when you're talking about guys like Ben Brown, Logan O'Hoppe, some of those guys hit, and you look back and you're like, man, did we really get what we needed out of that? And the Padres are kind of the great example of the risk and the reward. They totally transformed their team. They had a great stretch run, pushed the Dodgers to the limit in the NLDS, but at the end of the day, did not get to the National League Championship Series. And the question the Phillies will need to ask is, was that worth it? Is that worth it? Would it be worth it?
Yeah, and I wonder, not just in terms of like acquisition costs, but also from the seller standpoint. If you're a seller, whether you look at what that trade last year and you say, well, why should we sell one reliever when we can sell 2 and get more? So if you're the Pittsburgh Pirates, let's say, take David Bednar, let's take Danny Santana, put them in the same deal, and there's more of a return than we would get ordinarily if we were going to sell one and not the other, or if we sell them to separate teams. I'm not sure Dave Dombrowski is going to try to acquire anything other than a rental reliever, only because, you look at what he's done in free agency with the bullpen, and it's been mostly 1-year contracts. I don't know if he wants like more than a 1-year, couple of month relationship with any of these guys who he might acquire. But even then, the price for Carlos Estevez last year was 2 mid-level prospects. So I think that's probably where you start from. If you're talking about a Ryan Helsley, and we don't know if he's going to go or not in St. Louis, you're looking at giving up at least 2 mid-level guys for 2 months of Ryan Helsley. And if you pair him with another player, now you're looking at giving up more. So certainly the acquisition cost is high. I've written about this a little bit, in the last few weeks. One of the names you brought up was Aroldis Chapman. And that's one that I think is worth talking about a little more, given what the Red Sox just did, trading Rafael Devers to the Giants in a shocker. Both because of the time of the trade, middle of June, and also because of the contract that they moved in moving Devers. I wonder whether the Red Sox are, signaling that they might sell some pieces at the deadline. Maybe they try to buy, sell at the same time. And if so, look, Dave Dombrowski kind of has a type when it comes to relievers, and Aroldis Chapman fits that type. Big guy, hard throwing, has some postseason experience. Is he on your radar? Is he a guy he's been traded at 2 deadlines before? And oh, by the way, the teams he got traded to both times wound up winning it all. Is he a guy that you're watching in the next 5 weeks?
Yeah, I think to your point, I think he's the perfect. He's kind of the perfect thought experiment, because, like you said, he does rise to the level where he alone would dramatically change this team. And with him, you're getting as much certainty as you can possibly hope for out of a reliever. I mean, the numbers are just incredible when you compare it to his age and how long he has been doing it. I mean, the guy's still averaging 13 strikeouts per 9 innings. He's averaging less than 2 walks, I think. 1.5 ERA. Yes, and when you put him out there, he's Jose Alvarado in 2022. You're shaving an inning off the game. And I think the big question for the Phillies is that enough? I think how much does that move the needle for you? And you can argue that the lesson of the last couple of postseasons is you need more than that even. If Jordan Romano is pitching, in a safe situation in the 7th inning, does it ever get to Aroldis Chapman? Depends on how Jordan Romano's going. I think a lot depends on Matt Strahm over this next month, because they're cooked if he's cooked, and he's been muddling through, and there are times when it looks like that fastball is back to where it was last year, but then there's also times where he doesn't look like quite the same guy. And if they don't have him, you're talking about a bullpen trying to survive on one shutdown reliever. So yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that's the biggest. And look, every team in the major league could use another Aroldis Chapman in their bullpen. So I would tend to think there's going to be another team where that is closer to sealing the deal with Aroldis Chapman that has a deeper minor league system that can afford that kind of thing, whether it's the Dodgers or the Mets. Or look, Aroldis Chapman sure feels like a Steve Cohen acquisition to me.
They need a lefty too.
Yeah. I think, and keep in mind, they still got Manaea coming back. The Mets are a very interesting team. I think the bigger question, I'll throw this one at you. The other option is if you're trying to avoid overpaying for, a short-term solution. We saw Dave Dombrowski 3 years ago at the trade deadline trade for Brandon Marsh, a guy who, had 3 or 4 years of control left under him. Is that an option? I look at a guy like, Reed Detmers out in Los Angeles, who has recently transitioned to the bullpen and frankly looks like a guy who could turn into a Andrew Miller type or one of these converted starters that really thrives in the bullpen. Is that given the control, and the fact that it's not just it wouldn't just be a rental thing, does that make more sense? Where are you more comfortable giving up a healthy amount of prospects for a guy who has 3 or 4 years left of control? Look at Hader with the Astros, something like that, where maybe we're not, we put it this way, it might be on Dombrowski to get creative and approach a team with an offer that they can't refuse in a way that also helps the Phillies for much longer than the next year or 15 months.
Yeah, the controllable guy that everyone's going to talk about is Mason Miller. I don't think the A's are going to trade him, but just as they didn't trade him last year. But there's a guy who's got, I think, 4 years of control still and throws 100 and has closed games and is going to cost a fortune in return. But I think the conversation we're going to have in the next 5 weeks is the Phillies are all in, right? So if they're all in, is this the year to kind of push your chips in? And, they've been protective of the top of their farm system for the last few years. I'm not saying they're going to go trade Andrew Painter. He's untouchable pretty much. But, is Aiden Miller on the table? Is Justin Crawford on the table? Are you looking to make a more aggressive move because you're all in? Or, do you approach the deadline as you've approached it the last few years and trade kind of your mid-level guys to get rental pieces, fringe pieces on the edges who can help you here and there in order to kind of win now while also, as they like to say, keeping their window open for the next few years? Let me get you out of here on this. I was talking about this with someone the other day in the press box. I said, if you can only get one thing, if I told you can only trade for one thing, what's your priority? Are you talking about getting a bullpen piece? Do you need another hitter for this lineup? If you had one thing you could get and one thing only at the trade deadline, what's your objective?
I think it would be, your reliever, a top end reliever. Frankly, two. I think they need two. I'm not sure one cuts it, but beyond that, I think there is a question of if you would, look, to me, Bryson Stott is the guy who has the most to prove over this next month. Is it worth building the depth on your team rather than spending all your, bringing in a right-handed hitter who could potentially, or even a left-handed hitter with Brandon Lowe, a guy who could upgrade your production at second base there. Frankly, I think they should think long and hard about taking some lessons from the Otto Kemp promotion and the kind of energy that has brought to the lineup. And maybe that's your answer. Bring Justin Crawford up and have him play center field if you think he's capable of that. I know he's spending a lot of time in the corner this year, but start bringing some of these guys up. And look, Max Kepler's hitting better, so it wouldn't necessarily need to be him at this point. But build that bench and give Rob Thompson some options. Last year during the Mets series, part of the problem was he didn't have any options to change it up. Because you've got, look, Weston Wilson is we know who he is. Meanwhile, the Mets have a guy like Jesse Winker sitting around. They have Winker and Nemo and I'm totally blanking on the guy from the Tigers, the shortstop, the second baseman from last year. But they had all these guys who they weren't necessarily wedded to any one of them, which allowed them to then cycle guys through and stick with what was working at any given time. And that could be an option for the Phillies.
Well, I think one thing we can be sure of is that they'll do something. Dave Dombrowski rarely sits out a trade deadline, and almost never, in fact. And so I think that they'll do something. They'll make a move, maybe multiple moves. And it'll be an interesting next 5.5 weeks to watch Bryson Stott, to watch Brandon Marsh, to watch Ryan Kerkering, who picked up a save here in Miami this week. So just to kind of see how the pieces are shaking out, what they're going to need, and also, watch Bryce Harper, right? If Bryce Harper's out longer than they think, now all of a sudden you need a bat more than you thought you did. So lots to talk about over the next 5.5 weeks. We'll put a pin in it right now, and we'll get back to it, I'm sure, before July 31st. Dave, thanks for hopping on. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure I'll see you at the ballpark.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott.
Let's move to our last segment. We call this Hit and Run, where we take a question from a reader, viewer, listener, follower, etc. And this is a perfect time to mention that you can submit a question by email at slauber@inquirer.com or by finding me on the social media platform of your choice, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn, if you want to. I'm on just about all of them, so feel free to hit me up with a question or a comment. Lots of good questions this week. I want to stick with the trade deadline theme. So we'll go with this one from Ron Costello by email. He writes, is Mike Trout out of the question? Trout hasn't been in the postseason since 2014 and plays in Disneyland. He's hurt often enough, but he hits right-handed. Could a Trout-Kepler platoon be reasonable? And Ron continues, then there's the money. That would have to be worked on. But here's the thing. Does Trout want to finish his career as a movie star on display in the Magic Kingdom, or does he want to come to a real baseball town and lead a team to the World Series? Ron, thanks for the question. Love the references to Disneyland, by the way. And I'm always here for some good Trout to Philly talk, even though I still don't think it's ever going to happen. A few things to consider. Yes, he's Mike Trout. But as I sit here right now, he's hitting .227 with 11 home runs and a .768 OPS. It's still a 114 OPS plus, but he's definitely not the impact hitter that he once was. More importantly, he has a no-trade clause, and he has shown zero, and I mean zero, interest in getting out of Anaheim. Until he marches in there and asks for a trade, I don't see the Angels moving him. I don't see them discussing it much. They're also still trying to contend. I know it's laughable, right? The Angels are not a good baseball team, but I don't think they have totally waved the white flag yet. trading Trout would be a white flag move that would really sort of alienate their fan base out there in Southern California, in Orange County. And the money is a huge issue. Obviously, the more of it the Angels were willing to pick up, the better the return would be. I think it would probably be something that would have to come together in an offseason and not at a trade deadline when there's a little bit more pressure to get something done. I know we talk all the time about bring Mike Trout home, bring him back. He's a huge Eagles fan. We know that. We know that he loves the area. He's got his golf course in South Jersey. We know all of these things, but he's never really shown much interest in wanting to actually play here. I think he likes to come home and enjoy his time here, but playing here would be a different story. We know the Phillies have needs in the outfield. Wrote about this last week in the Inquirer, and Trout would help fill some of those needs. But look, I think it's still fantasy land, to keep up the Disneyland theme, to think that Trout would be coming, because I don't think the Angels are ready to make that kind of move. Again, like I said, it would change if Trout walks in and says, hey, look, we haven't won in 11 years. Trade me, get me out of here, get me to a place where I can win a World Series. But he hasn't shown any inclination to do that, at least not yet. Okay, we'll leave it there for this week. Quick programming note. Every episode of Phillies Extra is available at Inquirer.com, on the Inquirer's YouTube channel, and on Facebook. You can now listen to us as well on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please follow, give a listen, and as I think they say in the podcasting world, rate and review us. You can also head over to the Inquirer Live page at Inquirer.com and click on the Sports tab to find a full archive of our interviews. We're so proud of our lineup of guests here through 18 or 19, I think now, episodes. So please, if you've missed any, give a listen and get yourself caught up. That'll do it for this week. Thanks again to my guest, Billy Wagner, and to Inquirer columnist David Murphy. Thanks also to our producer, Angelica Irizarry. We could not do this show every week without her work behind the scenes to help put this all together. Until next week, I'm Scott Lauber. Thanks to everyone for listening, watching, and of course for reading the Philadelphia Inquirer.